Okay, so I'm supposed to get some writing done today, but there is something that you guys like really need to see. It's a rare occasion that it's like this, but it's just the way it is. Okay, watch. Like seriously, our room is never this crazy, right? We never make it this way, but it's just the way things are today. So before I can even get anything creative done, like I gotta clean all this up. So let's clean. And done. Phew, so much better. Cleaned the room, jumped in the shower, cleaned myself, shaved, came out, put on some fresh clothes, and now I am ready to get some writing done. Now, why am I putting you through the charade of watching me clean my room? Well, I have a confession to make, and that is I actually can't do anything creative in a messy environment. And now I know a lot of artists, like they can't work unless it's chaotic, unless it's a mess, but for as long as I can remember, I could never do anything creative unless I organized and cleaned the area around me, right? And I didn't notice this until I was like grown, that I actually needed that kind of an environment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is setting the environment for whatever it is that you are planning to do, right? If you think about this for a sec, there are religions out there where you can't walk into a temple until you've bathed or washed your feet, right? Whether you believe in that kind of dogma is not the point. The point is, I consider my writing or whatever creative endeavor I'm doing to be sacred. And for me, I need to make sure that the environment around me is as clean and as pure as I can possibly make it. And this isn't just about creative writing. I mean, this pretty much applies to almost every occupation that's out there. Think about surgeons for a second. Surgeons have an entire team dedicated to preparing the operating room. Like they have specific people who are in charge of very specific functions. Like someone's job is to make sure that all the tools are sterilized, and then there's another person whose job it is to make sure that the tools are placed in the proper area, and then there's another person whose job it is to hand that tool over to the surgeon. I've known surgeons to berate their staff for not having set the operating room right, because it's a life or death situation. That if they need a tool and everything is kind of a mess and they can't get to the tool that they need when they need it, someone can die, right? Now, writing is not that tragic, but the point is you need to start being more cognizant of the environment around you, because it plays a much bigger role than you might have not realized. Which brings us back to why I even started this episode with me cleaning in the first place. Because for me, I can't do anything creative unless I clean the environment around me first. And cleaning the environment for me is not just dusting and sweeping or wiping down windows and glass, right? A big part of the cleaning process for me is actually taking anything that might be a distraction and putting it away, right? Out of sight, out of mind. And that includes things like bills or notices or little sticky pads that remind me that I have to do this or that, because the last thing that I want to be happening while I'm writing is seeing something that I need to give my attention to, and now it disrupts my flow. Like, I don't want to be writing and going, oh man, I was supposed to call this person back, or oh man, that bill is due, let me go pay that real quick. I mean, those are things that you have to do because you're being responsible, but those aren't the things that you really want to be distracting you when you're getting into that creative flow. In fact, I even turn off the notifications on my email on my laptop right before I write, because I don't want to be writing and ding, oh, God, I gotta go make sure I pay attention to that email. And then now suddenly I'm lost in like 50 emails that I'm responding to and never got around to writing. Growing up, my parents were not necessarily the most organized people. Yes, our house was clean because my mom loved cleaning. But as far as organization is concerned, they kind of just put things wherever they want, and then they would never get rid of it, right? They would forget where they put it, and then it just sits there forever. In fact, to this day, I still get at my dad when I visit his house, like, dude, you have all this stuff piled into this room. Like, why don't you get rid of it? Why don't you give it to donation or do something else with it? But it just kind of just has piled on there. Even his garage is like full. And that's how it always was when I was growing up, right? My mom and dad were both artists in their own right. My father was an architect and my mom was going to school for interior design. To this day, she still paints and does a lot of that stuff. But I remember being in their studio one time and everything was just kind of a mess. Like, all their tools were just everywhere. And my mom asked me to get her something. And I remember just going crazy because I couldn't find it. And I'm like, how do you have all this stuff and you expect me to find something for you, but you have nothing where they need to be, right? They're the kind of people that, yes, the CDs and DVDs will look perfectly clean, like on a shelf, but I can almost guarantee you that it's the wrong disc inside the wrong cover, if that makes any sense. So it looks clean, but it's not organized. And I think that just got to me growing up. And now, like, I have to have my place kind of like pristine. And I don't know, maybe I'm on an OCD spectrum. I'm not sure, but I know that I have to have things a specific way in order for my mind to be clear. Now, this may or may not be you. Like I said, you may not necessarily need a clean environment for you to get any kind of creative work done, right? But the point that I'm trying to make in this video is you have to start being cognizant of what is the ideal environment in which you are the most creative. Because not many people really think about that. They just sit down and they start doing whatever creative thing they're doing, and then they start to wonder why they can't get in the flow. And then they get distracted at people coming in to talk to them, or they start blaming other factors, not really knowing why. It's because they haven't pinpointed what is their ideal environment so that they can now diagnose when something kind of deviates from that environment, right? Like, so for me, for example, if everything is clean and I start to get distracted, like, why am I not writing as good right now? I can look, oh, you know what? I left this out and that's distracting me. Or, you know, my kid might walk in and start talking to me, and then I'm like, throws me off my flow. And I know that that's not the ideal environment that for me to be doing anything creative. So pay attention. Pay very good attention. Think back to when you were most creative, right? Think about what time of day it was, right? Was it at night? Was it in the morning? Was it during the afternoon? Try to think about that last amazing thing that you wrote, right? Or painted or did anything creative. Think about that particular moment. Think about what surrounded you and try to duplicate that. Now, I've been at this creative thing my whole life. Like, I was born into an artistic family. Wrote my first poem in second grade. In fact, during that time, I was also taking oil painting lessons, which was hilarious because my parents like signed me up for oil painting classes. And like, I was the only kid there. Everybody that was taking that class were all like retired senior citizens. And here I was, a 7-year-old boy taking classes. Like, while all the other kids my age were taking ballet and karate and gymnastics, here I was with like senior citizens doing oil painting. But that actually was great because it set me up for the fundamentals of painting and writing and doing anything creative, right? You know, sometimes you can't be doing what everybody else your age is doing because it gives you a leg up in other areas, right? So then I went to high school and took art classes in high school, graduated high school, went to design school, and then started touring professionally as a poet in 2006. Like, I've always been around creativity. So as the years went on, I started studying how best to optimize my creativity. Believe it or not, your environment plays a humongous role in your productivity and creativity. And through the years, as I started to study my own creative process, I realized that I really only have three environments that have yielded me my best work. And coincidentally, these three environments also line up with the three stages of my creative process. Now, stage one for me is broad strokes. For painters, this is like taking your big brush and just throwing swaths of color onto canvas. You're basically just laying down the foundation by which you will build the rest of your painting off of. For us writers, this is akin to just throwing up on page, right? No rhyme or reason. We're not trying to be structured. All we're trying to do is get out all the ideas that have been swirling in our head about a particular topic, and we're just throwing it on page and seeing what sticks, right? We can organize all that later. But right now, we just want to get it all out. And for me, the best way to do that is being in public, right? I actually don't like being at home. I actually don't mind that the area is messy. In fact, I invite the distractions. If music is playing or people are walking and talking, I like that because it actually gives me ideas that I may not have otherwise seen had I been sitting at home. So what I like to do is sometimes I'll go to the park, I'll sit down on a bench, or I'll go to a coffee shop. I mean, I know it's like super cliche for like the writer in the coffee shop doing their little writing. And if you go to your local coffee shop now, I'm sure you'll see the same thing. All the writers are there and they're doing their thing. But that actually like works for me, right? Like I'll take a seat in the back of the coffee shop and I'll watch everybody else and I'll listen to conversations. You know, with coffee shops, it's a funny thing because people will come in during their lunch breaks or in between stuff that they're doing at work, and you can kind of get a glimpse of what their day has been going like because they'll be talking to the barista or talking to their friends about what's happening at work, and you kind of get a quick glimpse of these people's lives for just a sliver of a moment. So I actually invite those distractions. I like being in public to get these kind of ideas down and all these little intricate details about life that I otherwise wouldn't see sitting at home, right? Sometimes I'll even be in the car, and that actually helps too, like driving around and seeing ideas. And now, obviously, I don't want you to start writing your ideas down while you're driving, but what I'll do is I'll turn my voice recorder on my phone, and when I see something that's interesting, I'll record it, and then later on, listen to that recording and write it down. Right? So for me, stage one is being out in public, and I don't care where that is as long as there's a lot of stimulus around me that'll give me the ideas that I need. Stage two in the creative process for me is basically taking all those ideas that I've written down and I start to mold it into a workable piece. Now, again, if you're a painter, this is probably where you start to paint in all the elements that you're going to have in your painting. If you're a landscape painter, then this might be where you start to put in the mountains or where the rocks are going to go or where the trees are going to go. You start to put all that into your painting because you know that that's where they're going to land later. Same thing with writing. This is where I start to kind of move the lines around so I know where they're going to go in the poem. Is it going to be in the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, at the end? I start to kind of move things around. That process happens here. This is semi-public, but semi-private too, right? I have the quietness of the room, but if you notice, my laptop is actually facing out the window, so it's not fully private because I can get to see the world that's out there in front of me. You know, when we were shopping for a house, we looked at a bunch of homes before we settled on this one. And one of the reasons we settled on this house was because when I walked through that master bedroom door and I saw the view that was out here that was just facing the water, I immediately fell in love. Like I knew that this would be a perfect place for me to get some writing done. And it has not let me down yet. I've done a lot of my work just sitting here with my laptop facing out the window, and I can kind of still see the world and see how it plays out, but I still have the quietness of the room around me, and I'm able to kind of get some writing and get some fresh air at the same time by just opening the windows. And it's just been great to be able to write in this kind of an environment. So stage two for me happens right here. And finally, stage three in the creative process for me is when I actually finish the damn thing, right? So again, for painters, this might be where you take, you know, your fine-tipped brush, and this is when you start to add in all those little cool details, right? You know, all the little pieces of color that when people look at it up close, they're like, wow, that's a lot of detail in there. This when you really detail and clean it up. Same thing with writing. Right? I will basically look at my work and I will read it from top to bottom, and I start to make tweaks. You know, I start to take out fluff words or take out, you know, weak transitions and make them better, or look for better metaphors. And I actually detail the thing with vivid imagery. That has to rely solely on my imagination, which means that my environment around me has to be like pitch dark, right? Like nothing that I can look at that will distract me at all. Now I can't do that here because there's a window and it's bright out, right? So I usually wait until everybody's sleeping when it's nighttime. But I still can't do that here either because then my wife will be sleeping. So what I do is I usually take the laptop, go downstairs to the dining table, and the only light that's down there is just my laptop light, right? Like the light coming off the monitor, that's the only light that I have. Everything else is turned off. I'll usually make myself a drink, right? I like to have like that nightcap, and if you're under 21, this is not part of the advice that you should be taking. But for me, I like to have like a drink, I'll have my laptop, and I'll just start working, and I'll just start writing, and I'll look, and I'll really just fine tune that piece. And when it's dark and there's nothing distracting me and the house is silent and everybody's asleep, it's like the perfect time. Like that is really, really when I get my best work done, right? I finally fine tune it and cut it to get down the size, and I get it to just the right length, and it just from there is like, that to me is the most optimized environment. But it doesn't always work for all the other stages, right? Like, because if I'm sitting there in the dark, I may not get the ideas that I would get if I'm out in public. But I need the dark, and I need to be there in the final stage because I need to be in my head, right? And the only way to get in my head is to basically shut the entire world out. All right, that's it. That is setting your environment. Last week I said I would dedicate an entire episode to just setting your environment because I think it's so important, right? It deserves its own episode. It's something that we take for granted and don't consciously think about, but being cognizant of your environment will dramatically increase your productivity and your creativity, right? So really think about what makes you the most creative, right? Think about where you like to be. Think about the environment you like to have around you. Is it stuff that you like to have on your desk, like little kitschy things and little figurines? I don't know. Really think about it, because then once you are aware of what makes you the most creative, then going forward, you can now start to set your environment to set yourself up for that. Right? And if you already know the answer to that question, then drop them in the comments below. I would love to hear what ideas you guys have and what you use in your environment to make you the most creative. Hell, it might even give me ideas. I might be like, oh, yeah, maybe I should try writing in the zoo near the elephants and the giraffes. And yeah, that might work. You know what I mean? Like, that might be what it is. So let me know what you like to do, and I would, would love to hear you guys out and maybe follow your advice and, to help boost my creativity. But we will be back next week. Next week, I will actually start to delve into storytelling structures. I know up until now, we haven't really written anything yet, but I wanted to make sure that the foundation was strong, that we're mentally preparing ourselves to write that poem, right? So these last few episodes have been dedicated to just that. But next week, we'll actually start to delve into the writing process of everything and getting into the nitty-gritty details of that. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe below, and also make sure that you follow us on all our social media platforms at The Asia Project. That's where I'm at. Until then, speak like you mean it.